Please leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories. Let's get into the story. Jane wiped the sweat from her forehead as she weaved through the congested traffic of Lagos on her aging motorcycle. The scorching afternoon sun bore down on her, making her simple delivery job even more exhausting. She had been working as a delivery girl for nearly 2 years, struggling to make ends meet. Her days were long, her pay was meager, and every delivery counted. Today, however, she was running late. The traffic was worse than usual, and she had only a few minutes left to complete her drop-off. Her boss had warned her several times, another late delivery, and she could lose her job. Panic gripped her as she accelerated through a narrow street, her focus solely on getting to her destination in time. Just as she swerved to avoid a pothole, she failed to notice the sleek black car pulling out in front of her. Before she could react, her motorcycle skidded, and she crashed into the vehicle with a loud thud. Jane gasped in horror as she stumbled off her bike, her heart pounding. The car was a luxurious beast, the kind she had only seen in magazines. A deep scratch ran across the side, and one of the tires had burst from the impact. A wave of dread washed over her as she stared at the damage. She had no money, she could barely afford to feed herself, let alone repair a billionaire's car. Her hands trembled as the driver's door opened, and a tall, well-dressed man stepped out. His presence was commanding, his aura exuding power and wealth. Jane knew instantly that she was in serious trouble. The man, Michael, observed the scene with an unreadable expression before his piercing gaze settled on her. Jane swallowed hard, trying to form an apology, but her words failed her. She expected him to lash out, to demand compensation, to call the police. Instead, he remained eerily calm. "You're the one who hit my car?" His voice was deep and measured. Jane nodded, her throat dry. I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean to. How do you plan to pay for this?" He interrupted, his tone making it clear that she was out of options. She looked down at her worn-out shoes, shame creeping over her. I don't have money," she admitted. Michael studied her for a moment before making a decision. "Then you'll work for me until the cost is covered," he declared. Jane's eyes widened. Work for him? She had no idea what she was getting herself into. Jane's heart pounded as she processed Michael's words. Work for him? Her breath itched as she stared at his expression, calm, yet unwavering. Work for you? "But sir, I already have a job," she protested, desperation lacing her voice. She couldn't afford to lose her delivery work. It was the only thing keeping her afloat. Michael's gaze didn't waver. "Then find another way to pay for the damage," he said coolly, folding his arms. Jane's stomach twisted. She had no savings, no family to turn to, and no hope of repaying whatever ridiculous amount this car's repair would cost. As much as she hated the idea, she had no choice. "All right," she whispered, looking away. "I'll work for you." Michael gave a slight nod, satisfied. "You start today. Get your things and meet me at my mansion by sunset." His voice left no room for argument. Jane felt her world tilt. A mansion? She had never even stepped into a 5-star hotel, let alone a billionaire's house. As Michael walked back to his car, she let out a shaky breath, wondering what she had just signed up for. The ride back to her tiny apartment felt like a blur. Jane could barely concentrate as she packed her few belongings, anxiety gnawing at her. What kind of work would he expect from her? Was she going to be a personal assistant, a cook, or worse? She shook her head, pushing away the worst-case scenarios. "It's just work," she muttered to herself. "I'll do it, pay off my debt, and leave." That was the plan. But deep down, she knew this was the beginning of something much bigger than she could ever anticipate. When she arrived at Michael's mansion, her breath caught in her throat. The estate was massive, the kind of place she had only seen in movies. A butler greeted her at the gate, leading her inside. Jane's heart pounded as she stepped into the grand hallway. The floors gleamed, the chandeliers sparkled, and the air smelled of luxury. She felt out of place, like a tiny speck in a world she didn't belong to. And then, she saw him, Michael, sitting in a leather chair, watching her intently. "Welcome," he said, his lips curling into a smirk. "Your new life starts now." Jane stood stiffly as Michael's butler handed her a uniform, a simple black dress with a white apron. "You'll be working as a maid," Michael informed her, his tone casual. Jane's stomach twisted. A maid? She had never imagined herself cleaning floors and serving food in a billionaire's mansion. But what choice did she have? She took the uniform with shaky hands, swallowing her pride. "Fine," she murmured. Michael raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by her discomfort. "Good. You'll start tomorrow morning." With that, he dismissed her, leaving her standing awkwardly in the grand living room. The butler led her to a small but elegant room, her new quarters. It was larger than her entire apartment, yet she couldn't bring herself to feel at home. She collapsed onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. How had her life changed so drastically in just one day? She had gone from being a struggling delivery girl to a billionaire's maid. But one thing was certain: she would do her job, pay off her debt, and leave. Nothing more. The next morning, Jane woke up before dawn, determined to prove herself. She put on her uniform, tied her hair back, and stepped into the massive kitchen, where other maids were already at work. They barely spared her a glance as they scurried around, each focused on their tasks. She was given a mop and a long list of chores. As she scrubbed the marble floors, she felt Michael's eyes on her. He was seated at the dining table, sipping coffee, watching her with an unreadable expression. Jane's skin prickled under his gaze. She had no idea why he was paying so much attention to her, but she refused to let it shake her. Hours passed, and exhaustion settled in. By evening, her feet ached, and her back throbbed, but she didn't complain. She had survived her first day. As she dragged herself to her room, she couldn't shake the feeling that Michael was watching her more than necessary. And what unsettled her most was that she didn't entirely dislike it. Michael leaned back in his chair, watching Jane struggle through her tasks. He had met countless women, models, actresses, wealthy heiresses, yet none had intrigued him like this stubborn delivery girl who had crashed into his car. There was something raw and unfiltered about her, something real. He had expected her to break down, to cry, to beg for forgiveness. Instead, she had straightened her shoulders and accepted her fate. It amused him. More than that, it fascinated him. He wanted to see how long she would last in his world. And maybe, just maybe, he wanted to keep her here a little longer than necessary. Jane, on the other hand, was too exhausted to care about Michael's lingering gaze. Every muscle in her body ached from cleaning all day, and she wanted nothing more than to collapse onto her bed. But as she reached her room, she found a neatly folded dress lying on her bed, a shimmering blue gown. A small note rested beside it: dinner. 8 p.m. Don't be late. Jane's heart pounded. Why was he inviting her to dinner? Was this another part of her job? She stared at the dress, torn between curiosity and hesitation. What was Michael up to? And more importantly, why did she feel an odd thrill at the thought of dining with him? Jane paced back and forth in her small room, staring at the dress as if it were a ticking time bomb. She had spent all day scrubbing floors and polishing silverware. Why was Michael suddenly inviting her to dinner? Was this another test? Was he toying with her? She didn't want to wear the dress. She didn't want to sit across from a billionaire who clearly had too much fun watching her squirm. But another part of her, a part she wasn't ready to acknowledge, was curious. After much internal debate, she finally slipped into the gown. The fabric was smooth against her skin, fitting her perfectly. Whoever had chosen it knew her size well. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She made her way downstairs, her heartbeat erratic. The dining room was grand, with a massive crystal chandelier casting a golden glow over the long table. Michael was already seated, dressed in a crisp white shirt, his sleeves rolled up. His gaze swept over her, something dark and unreadable flickering in his eyes. "You clean up well," he commented, sipping his wine. Jane swallowed hard. "Why am I here?" she asked bluntly. Michael smirked. "Because I wanted you here." The air between them crackled with tension. Jane had no idea what game he was playing, but one thing was clear: Michael Kelvin was dangerous. Not in the way she had feared, but in a way that made her heart race in a manner she couldn't control. Jane sat stiffly at the dining table, her hands clenched into fists under the polished wood. The extravagant meal before her felt out of place, mocking her simple upbringing. Michael, on the other hand, looked completely at ease, swirling his wine glass with an amused expression. "You seem tense," he observed, watching her closely. Jane swallowed her irritation. "I just don't understand why I'm here. I'm your maid, not your guest." Michael chuckled, the sound deep and rich. "You intrigue me, Jane. It's not every day a woman crashes into my car and doesn't grovel for mercy." His words sent a shiver down her spine. He was toying with her, she was sure of it. "I'm here to work and pay off my debt," she reminded him, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "That's all." Michael leaned forward slightly, his piercing eyes locking onto hers. "We'll see," he murmured, his smirk deepening. The tension in the air was suffocating. Jane ate in silence, feeling his gaze on her with every bite. She didn't know what Michael wanted from her, but she couldn't afford to get entangled in whatever game he was playing. After dinner, he escorted her to the hallway, standing too close for comfort. "You should get used to nights like this," he said smoothly. "I like having you around." Jane's breath hitched, but she quickly masked her reaction. "I won't be here forever," she retorted. His smirk didn't fade. "We'll see about that," he whispered before turning away. Jane hurried back to her room, her heart pounding. She needed to remember her goal, pay off her debt and leave. But deep down, she feared that leaving would not be as easy as she had hoped. The next few days passed in a blur of work and unexpected encounters. Jane tried her best to avoid Michael, keeping her head down and focusing on her tasks. But he made it impossible. He found excuses to call her into his office, asked unnecessary questions about her work, and always seemed to be around when she least expected it. It was unsettling. He was a billionaire, yet he was paying so much attention to a mere maid. The other workers in the mansion had started whispering. Jane could feel their eyes on her whenever she passed. She hated it. The last thing she wanted was to be the center of attention, especially when it came to a man as powerful as Michael. One afternoon, as Jane was dusting the bookshelves in the study, Michael walked in. "How are you adjusting?" he asked casually, leaning against the desk. Jane stiffened but kept her focus on the books. "Fine," she answered curtly. He chuckled, clearly entertained by her resistance. "I don't bite, you know." Jane finally turned to face him, her patience wearing thin. "What do you want from me, Michael?" His eyes darkened at the way she said his name, something unreadable flashing across his face. "Nothing yet," he murmured. The way he looked at her made her stomach twist. She needed to be careful. Whatever this was, it was dangerous. Word had spread quickly among the mansion staff: Michael Kelvin, the billionaire, was interested in the new maid. Jane could feel the cold stares of the other workers, particularly from Amanda, the head housekeeper, who had been at the mansion for years. One morning, as Jane was cleaning the grand staircase, Amanda approached her with a forced smile. "You think you're special, don't you?" she sneered. Jane frowned. "I don't know what you're talking about." Amanda crossed her arms. "Don't play dumb. Everyone sees it. The way he looks at you, the way he calls for you." Jane stiffened. "I'm just paying off my debt. That's all." Amanda scoffed. Girls like you always think they can climb their way into wealth. But let me warn you, Michael loses interest quickly. And when he does, you'll regret ever setting foot in this house." Jane clenched her fists but didn't respond. She had no intention of falling into whatever trap Michael was setting. Yet Amanda's words unsettled her. Did he really have a habit of playing with women and discarding them? That night, as she lay in bed, she replayed every interaction she had with him. His lingering gazes, his teasing smirks, his cryptic words. Was she just another amusement for him? She had to remind herself why she was here: to work, to pay off her debt, and to leave. But deep down, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that leaving Michael Kelvin's life wouldn't be as easy as she had thought. The days stretched into weeks, and despite Jane's determination to keep her distance, Michael made it impossible. He was everywhere, watching her, teasing her, testing her patience. One evening, after an exhausting day of work, Jane found herself in the garden, seeking a moment of peace. She leaned against the stone railing, breathing in the cool night air, when she heard footsteps behind her. Running away? Michael's deep voice sent shivers down her spine. She didn't turn around. "Just needed some fresh air," she said flatly. He moved closer until he was standing beside her. "You're different from the women I usually meet," he murmured. Jane scoffed. "Because I'm a maid?" Michael chuckled. "No. Because you're not trying to impress me." His words caught her off guard. She finally turned to face him, and for the first time, she saw something raw in his gaze. Vulnerability? No, that couldn't be. "I don't play games, Michael," she whispered. He exhaled deeply, his eyes searching hers. "Maybe that's why I can't stop thinking about you." The confession sent her heart into a frenzy. Jane took a step back, shaking her head. "This isn't right." Michael clenched his jaw. "Why?" "Because I'm rich and you're not?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked away, leaving Michael standing alone in the moonlight. But as she closed the door behind her, she knew she was in trouble. Jane tried to avoid Michael after that night, but he refused to be ignored. He started appearing more often, asking questions about her past, about her dreams. She didn't want to open up, but somehow, he made it impossible to keep her walls up. One evening, as she was setting the dining table, Michael cornered her. "Why do you keep running?" he demanded. Jane swallowed hard, avoiding his gaze. "Because this, whatever this is, shouldn't be happening," she admitted. Michael's expression darkened. "And if I don't care about that?" She shook her head. "I do." Michael exhaled sharply, frustration evident in his eyes. "Tell me, Jane. If I wasn't a billionaire, if I was just a regular man, would you still feel this way?" The question hit her harder than she expected. Was it really about his wealth, or was she just afraid? "It doesn't matter," she whispered. "Because you are a billionaire. And I'm just me." Michael took a step closer, his voice softer now. "And what if I don't care about that?" Jane met his gaze, her chest tightening. She was at a breaking point, caught between her growing feelings and the reality of their worlds. One thing was certain: whatever happened next would change everything. Jane knew she was walking a fine line. Michael was persistent, and every time he looked at her, she felt herself slipping further into dangerous territory. She tried to remind herself of her goal: work off her debt and leave, but every interaction with him made that harder. His presence was everywhere, his eyes following her even when she wasn't looking. Whenever she entered a room, she could feel his gaze on her, burning into her skin like an unspoken promise. She hated how much power he had over her emotions, how just one smirk from him sent her pulse racing. But she couldn't let herself fall, not for a man like Michael Kelvin, a man who belonged to a world far different from hers. One evening, as she was cleaning his study, he walked in, casually leaning against the doorframe. "You're avoiding me," he observed, his voice tinged with amusement. Jane didn't stop dusting, keeping her back to him. "I'm working," she replied curtly. Michael took a slow step closer, his presence overwhelming the air around her. "That's not what I asked." Jane sighed, placing the cloth down, turning to face him. "What do you want from me, Michael?" His intense gaze locked onto hers, his dark eyes filled with something unreadable. "You," he admitted, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. Jane's breath caught. She swallowed hard, shaking her head. "You don't even know me," she whispered. Michael smirked, his confidence unshaken. "That's what makes this interesting." Jane turned away, her mind racing. This was dangerous. He was powerful, wealthy, and used to getting what he wanted. She was just a delivery girl struggling to survive. If she let herself fall, there would be no going back. But as she felt the heat of his gaze on her back, she realized something terrifying: she was already falling. Days turned into weeks, and despite her best efforts, Jane couldn't keep ignoring Michael. He found excuses to call her into his office, making her deliver coffee or documents he didn't need. Their interactions became charged, filled with unspoken tension. It was suffocating. Every time he entered the room, she felt her heart stutter in her chest, a reaction she despised. She knew the staff had started talking. Whispers followed her wherever she went. Maids, butlers, and even the guards exchanged knowing glances whenever she walked past. It didn't help that Michael made no effort to be subtle. One afternoon, he walked into the kitchen where Jane was preparing lunch for the staff. "Take a drive with me," he said casually. Jane blinked in surprise. "What?" Michael leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You've been stuck in this house for weeks. You need a break." Jane hesitated, gripping the wooden spoon tightly. "I have work to do." He smirked. "I'm your boss. Consider it an order." She wanted to say no, to remind him that she was only here to pay off her debt. But something about the way he looked at her, with a mixture of amusement and something deeper, made her reluctant to argue. Against her better judgment, she found herself in his sleek black car, watching the city blur past. They stopped at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, where Michael ordered coffee and watched her closely. "Tell me something about yourself," he said, breaking the silence. Jane hesitated, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "There's not much to tell." Michael raised an eyebrow. "I don't believe that." Jane sighed, looking away. She wasn't sure why he wanted to know about her, but she knew one thing: letting him in would only make things more complicated. Jane hated talking about herself. Her past was nothing special, just years of struggle, hard work, and survival. There were no fancy vacations, no rich parents, no luxurious lifestyle. Her mother had worked tirelessly to raise her alone, taking odd jobs just to put food on the table. When her mother fell sick, Jane had taken up delivery work, trying to make ends meet. It was a life of sacrifice, a life that didn't belong anywhere near Michael Calvin's extravagant world. But as she sat across from him in the quiet cafe, she could see the curiosity in his eyes. He wanted to know her, really know her. And that terrified her. Michael leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. "Tell me something real, Jane. Something no one else knows." Jane exhaled slowly, staring into her coffee. "I never planned to be a delivery girl," she admitted. "I wanted to be a nurse. But life had other plans." She expected him to mock her, to remind her that dreams were for people who had the luxury to chase them. But instead, he just watched her quietly, his expression unreadable. "You would have made a good nurse," he said after a long pause. Jane frowned. "How would you know?" Michael smirked. "Because you care. More than you should." His words unsettled her. She wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a warning. Either way, she knew one thing: she was getting too close. Jane tried to distance herself from Michael after that day. She threw herself into work, avoiding unnecessary conversations and keeping her head down. But it was useless. Michael found ways to keep her close, whether it was calling her to his office or standing too close when she served his meals. He was relentless, and worse, he was winning. The staff's whispers grew louder, and Amanda, the head housekeeper, made it clear she was watching. "You're playing with fire," Amanda warned one evening as they cleaned the dining hall. "Men like Michael don't fall for girls like us. They play with them. And when they're done, they throw them away." Jane swallowed a lump in her throat. She didn't want to be played with. She didn't want to be another woman Michael grew bored of. But then why did her heart race every time he looked at her? Why did she find herself searching for him in a crowded room? That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she realized something terrifying: she wasn't just falling for Michael. She had already fallen. It happened so suddenly, Jane didn't have time to react. She was walking past Michael's office late at night when he stepped out, almost colliding into her. His hands instinctively reached for her waist to steady her, and the moment his fingers touched her skin, the world seemed to stop. Jane froze, her breath catching in her throat. His grip was firm yet gentle, his warmth seeping through her thin uniform. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. Jane nodded stiffly, but she couldn't look away. The air between them crackled with tension, a tension that had been building for weeks. Michael's gaze dropped to her lips for a fraction of a second before he released her, stepping back as if realizing how dangerous this was. "Good night, Jane," he murmured before walking away. Jane stood rooted to the spot, her heart pounding. She knew she should forget about it, pretend it never happened. But as she placed a trembling hand on her waist, where his touch still lingered, she knew one thing for certain: this was far from over. Jane couldn't sleep that night. No matter how hard she tried to push the memory away, Michael's touch lingered on her skin like a brand. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his intense gaze, felt the warmth of his hands on her waist. She scolded herself for being so weak, for allowing herself to feel something she had no business feeling. He was her boss, a billionaire from a world she would never belong to. She was just a maid, struggling to pay off a debt. That was all there was to it. But deep down, she knew she was lying to herself. There was something between them, something neither of them could ignore anymore. The next morning, Jane tried to pretend nothing had changed, but the moment she stepped into the dining hall to serve breakfast, she felt Michael's eyes on her. He didn't speak, didn't even acknowledge her, but she could feel the weight of his stare. The staff whispered among themselves, exchanging knowing glances, but Jane kept her head down. She had to fight this, whatever it was. But as she turned to leave, Michael's voice stopped her. "Jane." Her heart skipped a beat. Slowly, she turned around, forcing herself to keep her expression neutral. "Yes, sir?" Michael's lips curved into a slight smirk. "Come to my office after breakfast. We need to talk." Jane nodded stiffly, her pulse racing as she walked away. She had no idea what he wanted to talk about, but she knew one thing for certain: she was in trouble. Jane hesitated before entering Michael's office. She stood outside the door, taking deep breaths, trying to steady her nerves. Whatever this was, she had to remain strong. She couldn't let her emotions cloud her judgment. Finally, she knocked. "Come in," came Michael's deep voice. Jane stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Michael was seated at his desk, his fingers intertwined as he watched her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. Then, Michael stood up and walked around his desk, stopping just inches away from her. "I'm tired of pretending, Jane," he said, his voice low and controlled. Jane's breath hitched. "Pretending what?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Michael reached out, his fingers brushing against her arm in the lightest of touches. "That I don't want you," he admitted. Jane's heart pounded against her ribs. She should have pulled away, should have reminded him that this was wrong. But she couldn't move. She was frozen in place, trapped between what she wanted and what she knew was right. "This isn't a good idea," she whispered. Michael smiled, but there was something dangerous in his eyes. "Maybe not. But I don't care." Before she could respond, he took another step closer, his presence overwhelming. Jane knew she was playing with fire, but at that moment, she didn't care either. For days, Jane tried to convince herself that nothing had changed, but deep down, she knew that wasn't true. Every interaction with Michael felt different now, more intense. The tension between them was undeniable, a silent storm brewing beneath the surface. She caught herself thinking about him at night, remembering the way he had looked at her, the way his touch had sent shivers down her spine. She hated that she was so affected by him, hated that she was beginning to crave his presence more than she should. One evening, as she was finishing her duties, she felt a familiar presence behind her. She turned, finding Michael standing there, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "You're working too hard," he murmured. Jane let out a shaky breath. "I have to." Michael stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "No, you don't," he said softly. Before Jane could protest, he reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so gentle, so intimate, that it made her heart ache. Then, before she could stop him, he leaned in. His lips brushed against hers in the softest of kisses, hesitant yet filled with unspoken desire. Jane knew she should push him away, but instead, she found herself leaning into him, her hands clutching his shirt as she surrendered to the moment. The kiss changed everything. Jane knew at the moment their lips parted, when she looked into Michael's eyes and saw the fire burning within them. This wasn't just an attraction anymore. It was something deeper, something dangerous. She pulled away, her breathing ragged. "This can't happen," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Michael's jaw tightened. "Why not?" Jane shook her head. "Because I work for you. Because I don't belong in your world." Michael reached for her hand, his grip firm yet gentle. "You belong wherever you want to be, Jane." She wanted to believe him, but reality was far less forgiving. If people found out, it would only bring trouble. The staff already suspected something, and the media would tear her apart if they ever caught wind of it. "I can't do this," she said again, her voice breaking. Michael studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine," he said, stepping back. Jane felt an unexpected pang of disappointment at his retreat. "But this isn't over," he added, his voice filled with quiet determination. Jane wanted to argue, but deep down, she knew he was right. This wasn't over. Not even close. Jane tried to distance herself from Michael after that night, but it was impossible. He was everywhere. In the way he looked at her, the way he found excuses to be near her. And worse, in the way she found herself drawn to him despite her better judgment. Every stolen glance, every accidental touch, only made it harder to fight what was growing between them. She was losing control, and she knew it. But what terrified her most was that she didn't want to stop. One evening, as she was walking past the garden, she heard voices, Michael's and another woman's. Jane stopped in her tracks, her heart pounding. She recognized the voice instantly, Amanda, one of Michael's close business associates. "You need to be careful," Amanda was saying. "People are talking. They're saying you've taken an interest in one of the maids." Jane's breath caught in her throat. "And if I have?" Michael's voice was calm but firm. Amanda sighed. "Michael, you know how this works. Your reputation matters. You can't afford a scandal." Jane clenched her fists, feeling a mixture of anger and hurt. Was that what she was? A scandal waiting to happen? She turned and walked away before she could hear more, but her heart ached with the truth. No matter what Michael said, their love would never be easy. Jane couldn't get Amanda's words out of her head. She replayed them over and over, each repetition cutting deeper. "You need to be careful. People are talking." Was she just a joke to them? A passing phase in Michael's life? The thought made her chest tighten. That night, she couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling of her small servants' quarters. Her heart was at war with her mind. She had always known this was a dangerous game, but hearing it out loud made it real. Still, there was a part of her that refused to let go of the way Michael made her feel, wanted, cherished, seen. The next morning, she moved through her tasks in a daze, her body on autopilot. But as she was dusting the grand staircase, she caught sight of Amanda again, this time, standing too close to Michael in his study. Jane wasn't the type to eavesdrop, but she couldn't help but watch. Amanda touched Michael's arm lightly, smiling in a way that made Jane's stomach churn. "Michael, I just want what's best for you," she purred. Michael stepped back, looking annoyed. "What's best for me is my decision," he said firmly. But Amanda wasn't easily discouraged. "And what about the girl? Do you really think she fits into your world?" Jane gritted her teeth, turning away before she could hear more. It didn't matter. The truth was clear. She didn't fit into Michael's world, and maybe she never would. Determined to push her feelings aside, Jane threw herself into her work. She avoided Michael whenever she could, keeping her conversations with him strictly professional. If he noticed, he didn't say anything at first. But she felt his gaze on her more than once, felt the tension thickening between them with every passing day. It was becoming unbearable. She needed to set things straight, needed to remind herself of who she was and where she belonged. But every time she convinced herself she was doing the right thing, the ache in her chest grew stronger. One evening, as she was folding laundry in the servants' quarters, a knock on the door startled her. She opened it, her breath hitching when she saw Michael standing there. He looked frustrated. "What's going on with you?" he asked, stepping inside before she could stop him. Jane swallowed, gripping the fabric in her hands. "Nothing. I've just been busy." Michael scoffed. "Don't lie to me, Jane." His voice was softer now, almost pleading. "You've been avoiding me." Jane forced a smile. "I'm just doing my job, Michael." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "And is that all this is to you?" Jane's throat tightened. "It has to be." She turned away, but before she could take another step, Michael caught her wrist. "It doesn't have to be anything," he whispered. Jane closed her eyes, willing herself not to fall apart. She had to be strong. But with Michael so close, she wasn't sure how much longer she could fight. Michael was losing patience. He had never been a man who begged for attention, but Jane was different. She was slipping away, and he didn't know how to stop it. That night, he sat in his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand, thinking about her. He had tried to be patient, tried to give her space, but it wasn't working. He wanted her in his life, and he needed her to understand that. The thought of losing her, before he even truly had her, made his chest tighten in a way that terrified him. The next morning, he sought her out. He found her in the garden, trimming the flowers with her usual diligence. She looked so beautiful, so unaware of how much power she had over him. He walked up behind her, clearing his throat. She turned, surprise flickering across her face. "Michael," he didn't let her finish. "Enough, Jane." His voice was raw, filled with frustration. "I don't know what you're trying to do, but I won't let you push me away." Jane's grip on the clippers tightened. "I'm trying to do the right thing." Michael exhaled sharply. "And what if the right thing is being with me?" Jane's lips parted, but no words came out. Michael stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Tell me you don't feel anything for me, and I'll walk away." Jane's pulse raced. She wanted to say the words. She wanted to lie. But she couldn't. And the moment stretched between them, the truth hanging heavy in the air. Jane felt like the world had stopped moving. Michael was standing too close, his words hanging between them like a challenge. She wanted to deny everything, to walk away and protect herself from whatever storm lay ahead. But she couldn't. because the truth was, she did feel something. And no matter how much she tried to ignore it, it wasn't going away. Slowly, she let out a shaky breath. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael's expression softened. "Then let me show you," he murmured, reaching for her hand. Jane didn't pull away this time. Instead, she let him intertwine their fingers, feeling the warmth of his touch seep into her skin. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Michael lifted her chin gently, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You don't have to be afraid, Jane," he said. "I want you. Not because I pity you, not because I feel some temporary attraction. I want you." Jane's heart pounded in her chest. No one had ever looked at her the way he did, as if she was worth everything. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be loved too. Their relationship changed after that night. It wasn't official, there were no grand declarations, no promises whispered under the stars. But there was an unspoken understanding between them now. A tension that had finally snapped, allowing something deeper to bloom in its place. Michael still had to be careful. He couldn't risk the media catching wind of their growing closeness. And Jane, well, she was still struggling to believe this was real. But every time Michael sought her out, every time he stole a quiet moment with her, she felt her walls crumbling little by little. The other staff members noticed. The glances, the way Michael's eyes lingered on her, the way his presence seemed to command her attention. The whispers started soon after, hushed conversations in the kitchen, stolen glances when she walked by. But Jane didn't care. For once in her life, she was allowing herself to be happy. She still had doubts, still feared what the future held, but when Michael pulled her into his arms late at night, when he kissed her with a tenderness she had never known, she allowed herself to believe in the impossible. That maybe, just maybe, love could find her, even in the most unexpected places. Jane basked in the warmth of Michael's affection, but a part of her remained wary. She knew their relationship was fragile, balanced on the fine line between secrecy and exposure. And as much as she wanted to believe in the magic of their stolen moments, reality had a way of creeping in. The whispers among the mansion staff had grown louder. She could feel their judgmental stares, their hushed conversations stopping whenever she entered a room. Some were merely curious, but others were resentful, seeing her as nothing more than a maid who had caught the attention of a billionaire. Michael, ever the protector, dismissed her concerns. "Let them talk," he told her one evening when she voiced her fears. "They don't decide what happens between us." But Jane wasn't so sure. She had fought her whole life to earn respect, to prove her worth. Being with Michael felt like a dream, but the fear of waking up and losing it all haunted her. And then there was Amanda, always watching, always waiting. The way she clung to Michael, the way she spoke about Jane with thinly veiled contempt, it was clear she wasn't going to sit idly by. Trouble was brewing, and Jane knew it was only a matter of time before the storm hit. Amanda wasn't the type to lose. She had spent years by Michael's side, believing that one day, she would be the woman he chose. And now, this nobody had appeared out of nowhere, stealing his attention, making him look at her the way Amanda had always wished he'd look at her. She refused to accept it. If Michael couldn't see the mistake he was making, she would make him see it. And she knew exactly how. Jane was cleaning the library when Amanda approached her, her smile saccharine sweet. "You must feel so lucky," she said, leaning against a bookshelf. Jane stiffened but kept her focus on her work. "I don't know what you're talking about." Amanda chuckled. "Oh, come on. A maid turning the head of a billionaire? It's like something out of a fairy tale." She paused, tilting her head. "But you know how fairy tales end, don't you? The real world isn't so kind." Jane set down her cleaning cloth, meeting Amanda's gaze. "If you have something to say, just say it." Amanda smirked. "Michael might be infatuated now, but men like him don't marry girls like you. You're a passing distraction, Jane. And when he's done, where will that leave you? Jane clenched her fists, refusing to let Amanda's words shake her. But as she walked away, Amanda's laughter echoed in her ears, planting seeds of doubt she couldn't ignore. Jane tried to push Amanda's words out of her mind, but they clung to her like a shadow. Was she really just a passing phase in Michael's life? The fear gnawed at her, making every interaction with him feel heavier. She started pulling away, finding excuses to keep her distance. Michael noticed immediately. "Jane, what's going on?" he asked one evening when she refused to meet his eyes. "Nothing," she lied. But Michael wasn't fooled. He stepped closer, his fingers gently tilting her chin up. "Tell me the truth." She hesitated before sighing. I don't belong in your world, Michael." His expression darkened. "Who told you that?" Jane shook her head. "It doesn't matter. It's the truth." Michael exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Damn it, Jane. I don't care about your past. I care about you." His words were sincere, but Jane wasn't sure if sincerity was enough. If he really wanted her, he had to prove it, not just to her, but to the world. And so, with her heart pounding in her chest, she made a risky decision. "Then take me to one of your events," she challenged. Michael's eyes widened slightly, but then, a slow smile spread across his lips. "All right," he said. "Let's show them exactly where you belong." The charity gala was one of the biggest social events of the year, and Michael had never taken a date, until now. When Jane stepped into the grand ballroom, every eye turned to her. She felt the weight of their stares, the judgment in their whispers. But Michael's hand was steady on her waist, his presence grounding her. "Ignore them," he murmured into her ear. "You look stunning." And she did. The elegant midnight blue gown he had chosen for her hugged her curves, the diamonds at her ears sparkling under the chandelier lights. Amanda was there, of course, watching like a hawk. But Jane refused to let her ruin the night. She walked beside Michael with her head held high, forcing herself to believe that she belonged. And for a while, she did. Michael introduced her to powerful people, held her close when they danced, whispered reassurances whenever she faltered. But just when she started to believe in this new reality, someone spoke. "Isn't that the maid?" The words were barely above a whisper, but they cut through the music like a blade. Jane's heart plummeted. She turned, locking eyes with Amanda, who wore a satisfied smirk. And suddenly, the fairy tale began to feel like a cruel joke. Michael saw the way Jane's expression shifted, saw the hurt flash in her eyes. He clenched his jaw, his hand tightening around hers. "Ignore them," he urged. But Jane couldn't. This was exactly what she had feared. No matter how much Michael cared for her, the world would never see her as his equal. "I need some air," she murmured, pulling away before he could stop her. She stepped outside, the cool night breeze hitting her skin. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, but the weight in her chest wouldn't ease. A moment later, Michael was there. He didn't say anything at first, he just stood beside her, staring out at the city skyline. Finally, he spoke. "You think this is a mistake, don't you?" Jane swallowed hard. "Michael, I don't want to be the woman people whisper about. I don't want to be a scandal." He turned to her, his expression fierce. "You're not a scandal. You're mine." The intensity in his voice made her breath hitch. "I don't care what they think, Jane. I care about you. And if you think I'll let some shallow, entitled people dictate my feelings, then you don't know me at all." His words sent a shiver down her spine, but she was still afraid. "What if they never accept me?" she whispered. Michael cupped her face, his thumb brushing against her cheek. "Then we'll make our own world, where none of them matter." Jane searched his eyes, seeing nothing but unwavering devotion. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, love was enough. Michael's words stayed with Jane long after that night. He had been firm, unshaken by society's judgment, unbothered by the murmurs of disapproval. But even if he wasn't afraid, she was. The thought of being an outcast in his world terrified her. Yet, as the days passed, Michael proved his sincerity with every action. He no longer hid their relationship. If anything, he was bolder. He took her out to fancy restaurants, held her hand in public, and even brought her into meetings at his company, introducing her as someone special. Each time he did, Jane felt like she was stepping into a new version of herself, one that dared to believe she could belong. But not everyone was pleased. Amanda's fury was palpable, and Jane could see the tension in Michael's company as well. Some of his business partners and even his board members voiced concerns. "You have an image to maintain, Michael," one of them had said. "A billionaire CEO dating a former maid? The media will have a field day." Michael's response was sharp, "Let them." But behind the scenes, Jane could feel the pressure mounting. She had fought all her life to survive, to carve out a space where she mattered. Now, it felt like the world was trying to push her out again, only this time, the stakes were higher. It started with a single article. Billionaire CEO Michael Alexander caught in scandalous affair with former maid. The headline was everywhere, plastered across news websites and social media. The story painted Jane as an opportunist, someone who had seduced Michael for wealth and status. Paparazzi swarmed the mansion, waiting outside to catch glimpses of her, to shout invasive questions whenever she stepped out. "Jane, how does it feel to go from a delivery girl to a billionaire's mistress? Are you using Michael for his money?" The words cut deep, each accusation chipping away at her resolve. Michael was livid. He called for legal action against the tabloids, but the damage was done. Everywhere Jane went, she felt the weight of judgment. The stares when she walked into a store. The whispers when she dined with Michael. Even on social media, her name trended, with thousands debating whether she was worthy of a man like him. It was suffocating, and worst of all, it made Jane wonder, was she dragging Michael down with her? One evening, as she sat alone in their bedroom, she stared at the mirror, questioning if she was strong enough to endure this. Was love really enough when the whole world was against them? Amanda saw her opportunity and took it. She walked into Michael's office, her expression calm but her words sharp. "You know this isn't sustainable, right?" Michael didn't look up from his paperwork. "Not interested in your opinion, Amanda." She smirked. "Maybe not, but your board is. The company is under pressure. Investors are worried about your reckless choices. They want you to cut ties with her." That got his attention. His hands stilled, his eyes narrowing. "Excuse me?" Amanda leaned in, lowering her voice. "They're giving you a choice. Either end things with Jane, or risk losing their support. Think carefully, Michael. Your entire empire is at stake." For the first time, real fear gripped Jane's heart when Michael told her about the ultimatum that night. She saw the conflict in his eyes, the weight of the decision he had to make. "I won't let them dictate my life," he vowed. But Jane wasn't so sure. She had seen what power and money could do to people. She had spent her whole life being reminded that people like her didn't belong in a world like his. And now, she had proof. "Maybe they're right," she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. "Maybe this isn't meant to last." Michael grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm. "Don't say that. I love you, Jane. And I will fight for us." She wanted to believe him. But what if love wasn't enough to win this battle? Jane had made up her mind. She had spent the night tossing and turning, haunted by the headlines, the stares, Amanda's words. And most of all, the ultimatum. She knew Michael loved her, but at what cost? His company, his legacy, everything he had built, was she worth the risk? That morning, she made the hardest decision of her life. As Michael kissed her goodbye, preparing for another battle with the board, she slipped a note into his pocket. "I love you. But I won't be the reason you lose everything." Goodbye." Then she packed her things and left. Michael found the note hours later, his blood running cold as he read it. Panic set in. He rushed back to the mansion, searching every room. She was gone. Her clothes, her belongings, everything, gone. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice shaking. No one had an answer. He checked her old apartment, her favorite spots in the city, even called her old job. Nothing. She had disappeared without a trace. And for the first time, Michael felt truly powerless. He had fought against rivals, against business enemies, against the media. But this was a battle he didn't know how to win. Jane settled into a small town far from the city. She found work at a little cafe, trying to build a new life. But every morning, she woke up with an ache in her chest, missing Michael's touch, his voice, his warmth. The town was peaceful, quiet, nothing like the chaos of being with a billionaire. And yet, she had never felt so lonely. Every time she saw a luxury car pass by, her heart skipped, hoping, maybe it's him. But it never was. Meanwhile, Michael was unraveling. He threw himself into work, but nothing felt right without her. His mansion felt empty, his bed too cold. He ignored calls, neglected meetings, lost interest in everything except one thing, finding Jane. He had his people searching everywhere, but she had vanished completely. It wasn't until weeks later that a lead finally surfaced. A former co-worker had mentioned seeing Jane in a small cafe outside the city. Michael didn't waste a second. He got into his car and drove. And when he finally found her, sitting behind the counter, unaware of his presence, his heart pounded. He had lost her once. He wouldn't lose her again. Michael stood at the entrance of the cafe, heart racing as he locked eyes with Jane. It was as though time had stopped, the air thick with the emotions they had both carried in silence. Jane, who had been wiping down a table, froze when she saw him. Her breath caught, and for a moment, she thought she might be dreaming. But there he was, as real as the ache in her chest. The memories rushed back, the warmth of his embrace, the way his voice soothed her when the world felt too harsh. Yet, the pain of their separation still lingered in her heart. She had made a decision to walk away, to let go for his sake. "Michael," her voice was barely a whisper, trembling as she spoke. He took a step forward, his eyes softening as he saw the rawness in her face. "I couldn't stay away any longer," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was foolish, Jane. I let them convince me that you weren't worth it. But I was wrong. I've never been more certain about anything in my life." Jane's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, shaking her head. "You've built everything you have. Your company, your reputation. You can't just throw it all away for me." Michael's expression grew intense, his voice strong. "I've already thrown it away, Jane. Without you, it means nothing. I'll leave everything behind if it means having a life with you. I don't care about the company. I care about you." His words hit her like a tidal wave, pulling her under, overwhelming her with the weight of their truth. For a moment, she didn't know how to react. She had walked away thinking she was doing what was best for him, but here he was, offering everything for her. The next few days were filled with turmoil as Jane tried to process everything Michael had said. He stayed in the town, determined to convince her that they could have a life together, away from the chaos of his world. He visited her every day at the cafe, each time bringing her flowers or something small to show how much he cared. His constant presence, his unwavering love, slowly began to break down the walls she had so carefully built around her heart. Yet, the fear remained. Fear that she wasn't good enough for him, that she would be nothing more than a liability in his world. Jane sought counsel from the few people who still remained in her life. She confided in her old boss, the one person who had always believed in her. "He's offering you everything," her boss said gently, "but you have to be sure it's what you want. Do you love him enough to risk it all? To step into a life you've never known?" Jane spent nights lying awake, contemplating the future. Could she really walk away from everything she had known, the simplicity of her small life, the routine she had built? Or was it time to embrace a future with Michael, one filled with uncertainties but also with love? It wasn't until Jane was sitting alone at the cafe, her hands trembling as she wiped down the counter, that she finally realized the answer. She wasn't afraid of Michael's world anymore. She wasn't afraid of the judgment, the scrutiny, or the complications. What terrified her was the thought of never knowing what it felt like to truly be loved, to truly belong to someone who cherished her. She had spent her whole life fighting for survival, but love, real love, was something she had never experienced. Michael had shown her what that felt like, and she wasn't willing to let it go. She found him waiting at the cafe later that day, his eyes hopeful, his expression soft. She took a deep breath and walked up to him, her heart racing. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm ready to be with you, Michael. I don't care about the company or the world we live in. I care about us." Michael's eyes lit up with joy, and before she could say anything else, he wrapped her in his arms. "You have no idea how much this means to me," he whispered. "I'll never stop loving you, Jane. This is the beginning of our forever." But even as Jane made her choice, there were still those who sought to tear them apart. Amanda, furious and defeated, used every tactic she knew to create doubt in Michael's mind. She hired private investigators to dig up Jane's past, hoping to find something that would tarnish her reputation in Michael's eyes. Meanwhile, Michael's board members had not forgotten the ultimatum. The pressure continued to mount, threatening to unravel everything he had worked for. Jane could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders as she faced the inevitable storm of public scrutiny and personal attacks. But Michael stood firm. He took Jane's hand in front of his board and the media, declaring that he would not be swayed. "This woman is my heart," he said, his voice strong. "She's not a liability. She's my strength. And anyone who can't accept that can leave." It was a bold move, one that defied every business protocol and every expectation. But it was the only move that mattered. For the first time in his life, Michael had chosen love over everything else. And for Jane, it was the moment she realized that she had finally found a place where she belonged. The days that followed were a whirlwind of excitement, with the media buzzing around Michael's public declarations of love. But through it all, Jane remained steadfast. She was no longer the shy, uncertain girl she had been when they first met. She had found her place by Michael's side, not as an accessory to his life, but as an equal. They faced the challenges together, side by side, knowing that love had triumphed over everything else. In the months that followed, Michael continued to lead his empire, but now, with Jane at his side. They took on the world together, building a future that was theirs alone. Jane had once feared that she wasn't enough, that she didn't deserve him, but now she knew the truth: love wasn't about status or wealth. It was about two people who had found each other and decided to build a life together, no matter the cost. And so, as they stood together on their wedding day, surrounded by friends, family, and the people who had once doubted them, they knew that this was only the beginning. The tables had turned, yes, but in the end, it was love that had won. Their love. And it would last forever. That's the end of the story. What did you learn about the story? Please leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories. Thanks for watching.